our first ever live virtual discovery lab. So if you've been with us before with in-person labs, or you've been on the Facebook page and you've seen our pre-recorded labs, we're doing something different. It's a new year, so new discovery labs. And so for January, we have Lindsay Nelson with us. So she's going to give a presentation on skates and rays, and a little outline about how this lab is going to work tonight. So first, Lindsay will give her presentation for you all. And then after that, you can leave any questions that you have for Lindsay in the chat as she goes through her presentation. And then Sarah and I, so again, we work for the Chesapeake Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve at VIMS. We'll give those questions to Lindsay and she can answer those for you guys. If you want to stick around after the presentation, we'll have a short demo video of the sixth sense of rays, a little demo that I filmed showing how rays and skates look for their food when they're buried in the sand. Pretty cool activity that you could potentially even do at home. And then we are going to end the night with a Skates and Rays Kahoot trivia game. And I'll go over Kahoot and how it works if you're not familiar with it already. And the winner will actually get a nice CBNERR-VA Virginia prize pack that we will mail out to you. So if you want to stick around for that trivia game, that'll be right at the end. And then either later on tonight or tomorrow, additional resources about skates and rays will be emailed to you guys with that email that you registered with. I do have a couple announcements. We have more Discovery Labs coming up later this year. So February is going to be Poop in the Ocean with Kristen Sharp. March is going to be Oysters with Dr. Ryan Carnegie. And then April is Harmful Algae Blooms with Marta Sanderson. And these, again, you will register very similar to how you registered for this lab. The link might be a little different, so you can keep following us on our social media pages. So those will have updates about when you can register for those upcoming Discovery Labs, along if you are subscribed to the e-tidings with VIMS, they send out reminders and registration for those events as well. And we do have with us today, Sophia and Maggie. They are our eco ambassadors. They're a couple of William & Mary undergraduate students, and they helped create a lot of the resources that we will be sending out to you all after the Discovery Lab. But I do want to introduce our speaker for tonight, Lindsay Nelson. So Lindsay, she just graduated from VIMS. She earned her master's in fisheries science after she earned her bachelor's from the University of Washington. So she is going to give her presentation. And again, if you guys have any questions for Lindsay during her presentation, feel free to leave it in the chat and we'll make sure we can give some time for her to answer those. If we don't have enough time, we'll send those questions to her and she can answer them at a later time for you all. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to sharing to Lindsay.
Okay. Let's start. Awesome. Great. I'm so excited. Thank you all for joining me tonight. I think we're going to have a really fun time talking about some animals that are very close to my heart, skates and rays. If you're interested in more fishy content from me specifically, you can follow me on Twitter at the handle here, and it'll also be on the final slide at the end. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know what stingrays and manta rays look like, but what are they exactly? Skates and rays are fish that have a skeleton made of cartilage, just like their cousins the sharks. Together, sharks, skates, and rays form a group of animals called chondrichthyans. But skates and rays evolved separately from sharks about 150 million years ago. In a group together, they're sometimes called batoids. You can see how they get their name when you look at their skeleton. The skeletal elements of their pectoral fins have fused with their head, which creates kind of a wing-like appearance. Most skates and rays have evolved for life on the seafloor, and as such, many of them are very flat and have thin or whip-like tails, but some have a much more shark-like body plan. Regardless of what their general shape is, they do have some other features in common. When we look at a dorsal view or a top-down view of this stingray, we see a pair of eyes, and behind it is a pair of spiracles. These are holes. When we look below the skate, or ventrally, we see along the snout are these pores called the ampullae of Lorenzini. These are electromagnetic receptors. These help the animals find their prey that are buried in the sand or in rock crevices. They also have a pair of nostrils, the mouth, and their gill slits. Now I want all of you to do something with me. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Think about how that air traveled into your body, went into your lungs and then out of your lungs, right? Well, when skates and rays need oxygen, they take water in through their spiracles on the top of their hole. It flows over their gills and then out through the gill slits. So I've talked about some of the ways that skates and rays are similar, but now we can get into the really fascinating ways that they are different. There are approximately 625 species of skate and ray that are divided into 4 major groups called orders. 34% of those belong to the order Myliobatiformes. These are our stingrays, manta rays, and devil rays. 11% belong to the order Rhinocristiformes, which are guitar fishes, wedge fishes, and saw fishes. 10% belong to the order Torpediniformes. These are our electric rays and torpedo rays. And finally, our largest group at 45% belong to Rajaformes. These are all of our skates. And skates and rays can be found worldwide, anywhere from freshwater rivers to estuaries like the Chesapeake Bay, open ocean, and even the dark, deep sea. The only places they are not found are freshwater lakes or very cold and high elevation rivers. And as such, they've adapted to warm tropical waters. They're found in seasonally temperate environments and also very cold polar oceans. Our largest ray is the giant manta ray. From wingtip to wingtip, it spans 7 meters. This is like if you took a 2-foot tall story building and flipped it on its side. That's how wide it is. Contrast that with our smallest rays, a torpedo ray. From the tip of their snout to the tip of their tail, it's only about 25 centimeters, very, very small. Skates and rays move about using a couple of different methods. Those that have a very shark-like body, or some of the torpedo rays with a big tail, they use that tail to create thrust and propulsion. But most of our skates and rays, which you're familiar with, kind of ribbon and oscillate their fins to get them moving. Others, like our free-swimming pelagic species, will flap their wings just like birds do. And in fact, some of them are strong enough that they can thrust their entire body right out of the ocean. You can tell what skates and rays eat based on their teeth and jaw morphology. On the left, it's a set of jaws from a skate. They have very small but sharp teeth, which is great for grasping soft-bodied prey, such as worms, shrimp, or small fish. In the middle is a cow-nose ray. They have very flat and plate-like teeth, which is great for crushing hard-shell prey like clams or oysters. And finally, on the right, this is a set of gills from a manta ray. Although manta rays do have teeth, they don't use those teeth to get their prey. Instead, they filter the seawater just like large whales do, using what are called gill plates, which are highlighted in this black box. Now, skates and rays also have scales on their body, but what's really cool is that these scales take on different forms. Most of the time, these scales are very small, and they're called denticles. When they're on the body, they give it kind of a rough sandpaper texture. But some of these denticles can be a little bit larger, and they resemble the thorns off of, say, a rose bush. Skates use these thorns as a way of defense against predators that might want to eat them. On a stingray, the stinger itself is actually a scale that has become very large and specialized. And finally, on sawfishes, they have these really long rostrums or snouts, and attached to those snouts are rostral teeth. But the rostral teeth are not the same as the teeth in the mouth. But you guessed it, those are actually scales that are very large, deeply implanted, and they help the sawfish to swing and stun their prey. The biggest difference between skates and all other rays is their mode of reproduction. Skates reproduce by depositing eggs in these leathery egg cases called mermaid's purses. You can often find these empty ones washed up on the beach during the spring or the summer. All other ray babies grow inside their mother and grow from a yolk before they're born live. Some of our skate and ray species have special electric organs. In electric rays and torpedo rays, they have a very strong organ, which they use to send an electrical current through the water to literally stun and zap their prey, or as a mode of self-defense. There's one species of torpedo ray off of Virginia. Encounters with humans are very rare, so there's no need to worry about getting zapped. If you encounter one, just give it some space and you'll be fine. Skates also have an electric organ in their tail, but this is much weaker than what you see in the electric rays. It's so weak that you and I can't feel it, but other skates can. So they use this as a way to communicate with one another. I hope that you've been looking at some of these pictures and been reminiscing about the times that you might have seen a skate or a ray. While not very common in the United States, a lot of people around the world will go fishing for skates and rays and eat them as a regular part of their diet. Perhaps you've seen some at an aquarium, in a touch tank, or you've gone on vacation and been snorkeling or scuba diving with some of these wonderful wild animals. Don't worry, skates and rays are generally harmless to people. They are not interested in chasing you or biting you or stinging you. They would rather swim away. Unfortunately, sometimes we have bad interactions with stingrays. This can happen when people are walking on the sand and they accidentally step on a stingray that's resting on the ground. To avoid this, you can do what's called the stingray shuffle. This is when you pick up the sand as you walk, and it allows the stingray to feel you coming and then swim away. This final slide in the overall presentation, I wanted to focus on skate and ray conservation. There's this wonderful organization called the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or the IUCN. They evaluate all species, plants and animals, and their extinction risk. This pie chart shows the extinction risk for skate and ray species. Thankfully, 40%, a large majority of them, are considered least concern, which means those species have really good numbers. They're not in any risk of being endangered. However, 10% are considered near threatened, 13 are threatened, 9 are endangered, and 6 are critically endangered. The largest threats to skates and rays by far is called bycatch. This is when we go fishing for other species like cod or shrimp, and we accidentally catch skates and rays. We throw them overboard, but a lot of times they don't survive. So if we catch a lot of skates and rays by accident in really large numbers, this can have really detrimental effects on their population numbers. Second biggest threat is loss of habitat. So if we're, because of human development in industry and neighborhoods, this removes available habitat for skates and rays. And finally, as our world climate changes, this can also change the available habitat for skates and rays. I wanted to highlight one example that, that is critically endangered. This is the small-toothed sawfish, species named Christus Pectinata. And I want all of you to repeat it back with me at home. Christus Pectinata. Perfect. I couldn't hear you, but I know you said it. So as you can see in this picture, this is a species of sawfish that gets really large. Because of its large size and its rostrum, it is very easily caught in fishing nets. Additionally, juveniles, or young, use mangrove forests as a nursery, and humans are removing mangrove habitat in order to make room for development. So a fish that was once very widespread in the Carolinas, the Bahamas, Florida, and the Gulf of Mexico is now restricted to just a very small part of Florida. So what can you do to help conservation efforts? First, I encourage you to make sustainable seafood choices and pick items that have a low bycatch impact. The second thing you can do is identify your favorite wildlife and conservation organization, sign up for their newsletters, follow them on social media, volunteer, and donate. Great. So now I want to switch gears a little bit from the overall presentation and talk about some of my master's research that I did at VIMS. I studied one species of skate called the clear-nosed skate, species name Rostroraja eglanteria. Again, we're all going to say it together. Rostroraja eglanteria. Fabulous. So this skate lives, I've outlined its habitat on this map using this dashed line. So from Massachusetts to Florida and the Gulf of Mexico, pretty widespread. Seasonally, they can be found up in the shallows or way offshore. They're about 2 feet long. That makes them a medium-sized kind of skate, and they live to be about 6 or 7 years old. I was interested in understanding this species' population structure. Population structure is a term that's used to categorize how individual animals of a species are mixing and reproducing together. And this can exist on a spectrum, which I've indicated by the 2 double-sided arrows. When we have low mixture, when not all individuals are mixing and reproducing together, we can have different populations. An analogy for this can be thought of as maybe the elementary schools in your school district. You can have a medium amount of mixing and isolation, which is analogous to our middle schools, or you can have high mixing, where all individuals can meet each other. And so this can be like your high school. So I assessed population structure using 2 different methods. Scientific surveys went out for me on the boats in the ocean. They collected skates for me and brought them back to me in my lab. The first thing I was interested in looking at was their genetics, or their DNA. To do this, I took tissue samples from my skates. I extracted the DNA. That DNA was sequenced, and then I analyzed those sequences. I also examined their morphology, which are comparing differences in size and shape and other physical characteristics. To do this, I took lots of different measurements of my skates. I took X-ray photographs to count all of their bones, and I also counted all of the thorns that were on the outside of their body. So what did I find? Well, interestingly, both the genetics and the morphology suggest the same thing, that we have 2 distinct populations of clear-nosed skate. One population in the Gulf of Mexico. The other one consists of all clear-nosed skate along the U.S. East Coast. Why does this matter? Why is it important? Well, understanding population structure is useful for fisheries management and conservation efforts. Like a lot of skates and rays, the clear-nosed skate is caught as bycatch in our commercial fisheries. So if we understand their underlying population structure, we can use that information to set limits on how many we can catch, and then we can better predict how resilient they are to fishing pressure and how likely they are to rebound and repopulate under different levels of fishing pressure. And with that, I am happy to take any questions. Thank you all for joining me.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you.
We do have a couple of questions that came in the chat. The first one is, do rays glide in the water, or would you say that they swim?
Oh my goodness. I would say they do both. Yes, I would say they do both. I think they swim and create the momentum, but then they also have the capability to just glide once they get going.
Okay. Another question is, are clear-nosed skates found as far north as Maine?
No, they are not found that far north. It's a little bit too cold up there for their preference.
And I had a question too, Lindsay. I'm sure a lot of people want to know what made you very interested in, working with skates and rays. What really made you want to pursue this as your career and your thesis project?
Mm-hmm. So I've been interested in fish in general for many years, since I was in high school. I thought fish were cool, especially sharks. There's something cool about how they haven't evolved much over the years, and so it's interesting to see how they still survive in a changing world. I worked for a little bit after I graduated high school as a fisheries observer, so I got to understand the fishing industry. And then I decided to go to graduate school to sort of expand my skill set, add more tools to my toolbox to understand different aspects of fish. I ended up working with skates just out of interest, really. I had the opportunity, they're very common, so I thought, let's give it a go.
Cool. We did have some other questions come in. So Nicole asks, are there different colored skates?
Yes, there are. Most of them are kind of brownish, but you probably noticed that my skate has sort of like spots and stripes, like almost kind of tigery. There are lots of skates that have one circle on each wing that almost look like targets. So these eyes, or ocelli, are very common in different skate species. Others can be a plain color, some are more mottled, or some are more like leopard spotted. So there's some variety, but they're all shades of brown and black or purplish.
And then what are clear nose skates eating in the bay, and cow nose rays eating in the bay, especially if there's some issues with oyster populations going down?
That's a great question. I might leave the cow nose ray answer up to both of you. I think there was some controversy about what it is that they're eating. The clear nose skate eat things that are typically found in the sediment. So things that are buried in the sand, like worms and shrimp, or very small fish, sometimes snails, other invertebrates like that.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, the cow nose rays, they definitely still eat oysters whenever they can find them. And they would also eat hard clams. Actually, in our beach right off of our laboratory, when you walk out into the water, you can feel large depressions in the sand. And that's from the cow nose rays. They come in and use their mouth parts to feel around for some of the clams and oysters that might be on the bottom. And I think Tara will get into that a little bit more in her demonstration as well.
We have a couple more questions. Do you study any prehistoric marine reptiles or any other animals?
I do not. I haven't had the opportunity to do anything with fossils or any other, basal organisms, if you will, that are not very evolved. Just the clear nose skate and another species of skate in the Gulf of Mexico, but that was a little bit of a side project.
Perfect. Probably an expert.
Someone asked if people eat the meat of ray. And I will say that in a previous discovery lab about stingrays, we actually served cow nose ray. There are some people that are trying to create a fishery for cow nose rays because there are so many of them in our area. And cow nose ray at least tastes sort of like steak. It's a red meat. Skates would be different. So yeah, some people do eat the meat of cow nose rays.
And Beth is wondering, how has commercial fishing impacted the population of rays and skates in the Chesapeake Bay?
In the Chesapeake Bay, I would say that the impact is very low. Skates and rays typically come in seasonally in the spring or summertime and leave towards the end of fall and winter. So they're not here year round to experience the pressures of all fisheries. But what I remember is that skates specifically are doing great in the Chesapeake Bay. They come back year after year in mighty numbers.
And they actually have less and less predators. So as some of their larger predators, which would be like sharks, are decreasing, then we often see more rays. So it's actually the opposite. We actually see more rays than the numbers going down.
Excellent point.
Kara has a very important question for you. Are you thinking of doing a PhD? And if so, would you continue studying skates and rays?
I will not be continuing in academia and pursuing a PhD. I have no interest in becoming a university professor. Instead, I'm looking for employment either as a scientist or a policy analyst, or perhaps maybe even an educator further down the line.
And then someone's asking about freshwater rays and skate and how common they are, maybe compared to ones you find in estuarine environments in the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Freshwater species typically are the stingrays. Maybe some of you have seen there's a giant freshwater stingray. A lot of these are in tropical environments, very warm, year-round. So where it's interesting, in the tropics, there's not very many skates, but there are a lot of stingrays. So there's sort of a gradient where you can find one or the other. But there are stingrays in these tropical rivers that lead from the ocean. So they're a little bit brackish, maybe have a little bit of salt water in them.
Sweet.
Someone asked, how many different species of rays are there in the world?
In the world, there's about 625. I got that number from a textbook called Rays of the World, which is excellent if you guys can go to the library and get your hands on it. However, new species are being described somewhat frequently now that we have more genetic tools to sort of separate out what we consider cryptic species, where two species look very similar to one another in their color pattern and their size, but the genetics say that they're very different. So we are describing new species as the years go on, and I expect we will see more of them.
I think we have time for maybe two more questions, and there are two in the question and answer that I think would be great for us to answer. So the first one is about your research. Do you have any idea why there is a genetic difference between the ones you studied from the Gulf and the others from the East Coast?
Oh my gosh, that is such a good question. I meant to talk about it in my slide and I forgot. So thank you so much for reminding me. When you think about the areas that occupy the Gulf of Mexico and the East Coast, what separates these two areas is the state of Florida. So you have a really big landmass that skates can't walk over, they have to swim. There is water around the tip of Florida, but it's a little bit too warm for their preference, and the Gulf Stream moves through there, and that current is very swift. So this creates a physical barrier where the skates can't cross from one area to another. So in the past, we've had different levels of sea level rise and fall. So when sea level is really high, they were able to cross at one point, and then when the sea level decreased, they were cut off from each other.
Great. And our last question I think that we'll take before we go into our demo is, do skates and rays usually travel in small groups? Once I was across the York River and saw a group of them very near the beach.
Mm-hmm. Very common that skates and rays congregate in groups. Not all of them do, but a lot of them, including clear-nose skate and cow-nose ray, they seasonally move from offshore to inshore or from south to north. And so they often do so in these large groups. And sometimes there might be separate groups that are mostly male and some that are mostly female during their periods of reproduction.
Awesome. So if you guys still have some questions for Lindsay, you can still put those in the chat. We can send her those questions at a later time or later on tonight. She can answer those for you. But we do want to thank Lindsay for taking some time out and speaking with you all. And we are going to kind of transition over to our second part of the evening. So this demonstration is something I filmed a little bit ahead of time, and Lindsay talked about this briefly in her presentation about the different senses that these skates and rays have. And so us as humans, we rely when we're maybe not hunting for our food, but we rely on our sense of taste, hearing, sight, touch, smell. Those are all very important. And skates and rays do rely on a lot of those same senses, but they are very unique animals in the sense that they have a couple extra senses. So one that's found in some of those animals and a lot of sharks are lateral lines. So those are allowing them to pick up on those vibrations that Lindsay talked about. So using that stingray shuffle as you're walking through the sand, they pick up those vibrations. So if it's something small, they might think, oh, that might be a food item, and they might move towards that vibration. But they also have another sense. And this is what that video is going to touch on. And before I do that, I do want to show you guys something that I have. And we mentioned that they don't have exactly teeth like we do. They have mouth plates. And so I have a couple of examples of some ray mouth plates here. They might be a little hard to see up close. But this is from a spotted eagle ray. I used to dive in aquariums, so that's how I was able to find these. They lose them, like sharks lose their teeth over time. So it's like a conveyor belt system, so they fall out pretty often. So usually if you find them on the beach, they'll be very black, like shark teeth. So that means they're fossilized. These are fresh because they fell out in the aquarium and we were diving and we found them. But those are the types of senses that they'll use. They'll crush up a lot of those hard shelled items with those mouth plates. But again, this demonstration shows you a very special sense using electroreceptors. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to play this video for you all. And Sarah, if you'll let me know if the audio works fine.
Yep, I can hear it.
Daily lives, we use our sense of smell, touch, hearing, taste, and sight. Skates and rays have an extra sense, which allows them to hunt for their prey. On the underside of rays, you will find their mouths, which are comprised of mouth plates and special sensory organs called ampullae of Lorenzini. Sharks also rely on ampullae to hunt for food. You can see the jelly-filled pores located on the skin right above the mouth. Rays have jelly-filled pores that lead to canals that cluster together. When electric charge enters the pore, it travels through the conductive gel in the canal to the ampulla. And this allows the ray to locate prey on the sea floor. To demonstrate this, we attach a magnet to our ray. As it swims along the sand, it attaches to magnets on the prey item. These magnets represent the ampullae in our rays. As the ray swims along the seafloor, they can sense vibrations and electric fields given off by their prey items. These items include soft-shelled clams, shrimp, small fish, and sometimes oysters. Studies continue to better understand this sixth sense. Skates and rays play vital roles in the ecosystem, and with management and conservation efforts, we can ensure their longevity for the future. Awesome. So yeah, that demonstration, so what we're mimicking there is we have a container filled with sand, pretty shallow, and the prey items, we attach magnets to them, and we attach magnets to our stingray. So as the stingray swims along the sand, it'll attach to that prey item, and it's because of them, that ampullae that they have. And so fish can actually, as they're swimming or they're opening and closing their mouth in the ocean, there's studies that are being done that show that that actually gives off an electrical current. It's a very small, but since these ampullae are so sensitive, our skates and rays and sharks can really pick up on those currents and locate prey really easily. And when that stingray is on that sandy bottom, you have to remember their eyes are on the top of their body. So they have to rely on that sense to really look for their food that's hidden in that sandy bottom. So it's a very unique way for these animals to hunt for their food, especially since they can't rely on their sight or their smell necessarily during that time. But they do rely on those senses, of course, looking for other prey items. They mainly use that, of course, when they're looking down in that sandy bottom along the sea floor, because that's where we usually find them resting or hunting for their prey. So this is something you guys can definitely do at home. I found some of the magnets can be a little tricky. You might need some pretty strong ones, and you want them pretty shallow in the sand, but it does a really good job of demonstrating how magnets really represent those pores, which send nerves to the brains of these animals to basically say, hey, there's prey right there, let me grab it. So they are far ahead of their time with ways that they can really look for their food. So it's a really unique trait for our skates and our rays and even our sharks. They rely on it just as much as those other animals do. So unfortunately, I wanted to do it as a live demonstration. With filming, it's a little difficult to do. But again, if you guys do want to try that out at home, we'd love to see video or pictures of you guys trying it. So you guys can post that to our Facebook. We would love to see that. But if you guys have any questions about that demo, you can leave that in the chat as well. Sarah, did you have anything to add before we do our Kahoot game?
We did get one question from David that asked, what is the amplitude of the charge emanating from the prey, voltage and current? I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know. Lindsay, do you know? That is
from the prey? Yeah, not sure.
I know from the research I've done, it's very small. And they did a very cool experiment in an aquarium where they had an aquarium, and on the bottom they had 3 different sensors that would give off an electric charge, and they would kind of, you know, scale it up or scale it down to see if the skate or the ray would go to it. And they found that even if it was pretty low and there was no food there, they would just pick up on that that sense and go right towards it. But unfortunately, they didn't tell us exactly, you know, how strong of a current it was or anything, but they did mention it was pretty small. So they're very sensitive to it.
And similar to what we just showed, we have a researcher at VIMS who studied this with sharks, and they were trying to figure out how to have sharks avoid hooks from fishing line. And they did an experiment in a large tank with sharks caught on the eastern shore, and they put magnets in the water close to the bait, and they found that the sharks will avoid certain levels of the magnet. It interrupts with their senses. And so they were able to design fishing hooks that would deter sharks from trying to eat the bait and getting hooked on these hooks that were meant for other fish. I don't see any other questions though in the chat. We can't hear you.
I was on mute. I'm sorry about that. So if you guys want to stick around, we are going to do a Kahoot trivia game, which I will explain in just a moment. I am going to pull that up.
With prizes.
Yes, with prizes. So the winner of this game will get a CBNERR prize pack from us. But how this game works, if you're not familiar, so Kahoot, you can play on your smartphone, your Android, iPhone. If you have an iPad, you can even open another window on your computer, and you will type in www.kahoot.it. Once you do that, it's going to ask for a game pin. So that game pin is located on the screen you're watching now. So you'll go ahead and enter that in. And then once you do, your name's going to pop up. You'll enter your name. You can do a nickname if you like. And your name will then pop up on your phone. It'll say you're ready, and then it'll pop up on our screen here. And so how Kahoot works is, I believe this one has 7 questions. It's a little bit of a review of some of the stuff we've talked about during this Discovery Lab. There might be a question or two that we may not have discussed, so we'll see who is the real skates and ray expert out there today. But you earn points by getting correct answers, but you also get more points if you answer correctly quicker. So if you're quick and right, you'll get more points. So that's kind of the trick of this game. So what will happen is, on the screen you're watching with us, you will see the question that's being asked. And then on your phone or your iPad, wherever you're playing from, you will see 4 blocks that have a shape and a color in them. And those will actually correspond with the answer choices on my screen. So you'll be looking at what's on my screen, but you'll answer via your phone, okay? And that's how you'll know if you got the correct answer or not. And so it'll keep track as we go. So we have about 30 people who have joined. I'll give it another second if you're having some issues. Totally fine.
And you can still play along. If you don't want to use the Kahoot, you can still try and test your knowledge from home.
Definitely. And I know sometimes we have technical issues. I'm sorry. But we'll go ahead and get started. So our first question. So what are the name of the electroreceptors used by skates and rays? So again, you'll answer on your phone, your iPad, that extra screen, and those choices should correspond what's on our screen here. And then each question you do get about 20 seconds. So nice, guys. So yeah, it's that ampullae of Lorenzini. I made a little pun there. I said X-ray vision. You know, I like my puns, so tried to trick you there. So we'll see who's taking the lead. Looks like Kristen's taking the lead. Our next question, how do skates and rays camouflage? So not something we really talked about. Yes. So this one can be a little tricky. It is counter shading. And counter shading is used by a lot of animals in that family, the sharks too. So they have a light colored belly and a dark colored top. So if our ray is swimming kind of in the middle of the water column and I look up, that belly camouflages with the sun. Where if I was swimming above him and I look down, that dark top blends in with the dark sea floor. So we call that counter shading. And we got Maggie in the lead. Everyone's pretty close though. True or false? Skates and rays lay eggs. So this one got some people. So the correct answer is false. So skates and rays lay differently. So our skates are the ones that they lay those mermaid cases, and our rays are the ones that give birth to live pups. So even though they're within the same family, they do a little bit different when it comes to reproduction. Abigail, nice. So we've had a little change here. We'll keep going. How can you avoid being stung by a ray while in the water? Nice. Yep. So remember we talked about that stingray shuffle, so they can pick up on those vibrations. They know something big's coming, so they'll get out of the way. We never want to touch any stingray if you're not familiar with handling them or you're not permitted to. And don't let them scare you from not ever going into the water. You still got it going. Good job, Abigail. Next question, are skates and rays edible? Nice. So yes, they are edible. So in a lot of cultures, they are considered a delicacy or they are common to eat. Not really here in the United States, but they are edible. Good job, guys. We're still keeping a tight race. Got a couple questions left. Name this ray. Nice. So yep, this is a cownose ray. So they are pretty common along the York River. You might have seen them along the York River before in the Chesapeake Bay. If you've been to an aquarium where they have touch tanks, this is probably the stingray that you were touching is a cownose ray. They're very docile and pretty small. So you'll see them a lot in aquariums. Nice. Okay, so guys, we got one more question. Where are barbs located on rays? And this one is a little tricky. So their barb is located towards the base of their tail. So it's not always going to be the entire length, but that's where it attaches, right near where their tail and their body meets. Awesome, guys. So nice job, Kristen and Joe. It looks like everyone, you guys got them all right. It just came down to like who was the quickest. So that's Kahoot for you. And Kathleen snuck in there. Nice. And then Maggie and Abigail were our runners up. So Kathleen, if you want to go ahead in the chat and just send Sarah and I or one of us your email address, and we will get in touch with you and send you your CBNERR prize pack for you. So you can leave that in the chat or you can email us separately. It's up to you what you would like to do.
Thank you guys for playing. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed with all of your knowledge about skates and rays.
Yes. I've tested this out with other people and they did not do as well as you all did. So you should be proud. But if you guys have any questions for us or for Lindsay, we can stay on for a couple more minutes. But we do want to thank you guys very much for coming to our first virtual Discovery Lab, especially a live one. This is definitely new for us. So we hope that you guys are able to come back for our February, March, and April, same kind of format. We're going to have some different speakers and some different activities planned. And just keep an eye out on your email for those additional resources from our eco ambassadors. They worked hard on those. So those are things you can do at home with your family if you guys get the opportunity to. So, yeah.
Thank you guys so much. We did have a question, Lindsay, that I'm going to pose to you. Is it generally long line fishing that impacts skates and rays?
Typically not. Long line has a much bigger impact on sharks, but because most skates and rays live on the bottom, they're mostly impacted by dredge. So when we go fishing for scallops, there's a dredge gear that drags along the bottom and can capture skates, or nets, bottom trawl, TRAWL. That's when you drag a big net to catch your bottom dwelling fish.
And we had another, they might have missed this in the beginning, but they asked what's the biggest difference between skates and rays?
Mm-hmm. So the biggest one is their mode of reproduction, where skates lay eggs and all other rays give birth to live young. There are some other smaller differences between them. I think the stingrays are lacking a pelvic fin. So there's a pair of fins behind their pectoral wing, and skates have quite like a muscular one, which they use to kind of like kick around. You might have seen them swim up on the glass a little bit. So they have kind of an extra feature there. There's some differences in their tail, and there's some differences on how the degree to which the wings are fused with their head. Skates are less so, and that's why the clear nose skate gets its name from that little like clear window. Stingrays, their rays go all the way up to the top.
And then what purpose do rays contribute to the ecosystem?
Ooh, that's an excellent question. They're predators. So, and sometimes thought as mesopredators because they also have predators of their own. So they're in the middle, the upper to middle of the food web. So they eat a lot of other things that eat phytoplankton or eat plants, but then they are also eaten.
Oh, I like this question. How would a ray find food if one of its like electroreceptor sensors was injured, I guess?
No, I've never thought about that. Great question. I think it might be difficult for them to use their sight because if their eyes are on the top of their head, they can't quite see what might be below them. But they may still be able to feel if their prey started to move away, that they might feel the waves of the water as their prey swim away. They also have their rostrum, so they do, or their nostrils, they have a sense of smell as well.
Definitely think it would be harder for them to survive without that.
Yes.
And I know their sensors, they cover a large surface area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even if like some got, injured or weren't able to use those, they still had more because they do cluster together internally. So even if something happened to one pore or a cluster of pores, they have others too that can kind of compensate, I would guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any other questions. I think we've got them all. Oh, one just came in. Do skates and rays contribute to sediment aeration and bioturbation when they burrow in the sand or disturb the sand?
I would say a little bit, yes, in the kind of the top layer of the sediment, but not to the same degree as burrowing clams or worms would.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think that's all we got.
Thank you guys again for joining us. And we hope to see you next month for Poop in the Ocean.
It'll be fun.
Have a good night, everyone.